fellow YouTubies and YouTube family. Welcome back to my channel. I'm glad to have you back. I wanted to stay as consistent as possible with these videos. I'm going to try to bust out as many as I can and then just, line them up so that they're consistent once a week at least. And we'll see how that goes. As I say previously, I'm not putting pressure on myself. I just want this to happen organically, and I want I want this to become a healthy habit in my life. And I don't want to put any pressure on myself because I know how content creators can stress themselves out trying to deliver for the viewers and watchers, and I don't have that many right now, but it's still good practice to have. And I enjoy storytelling. I enjoy telling my stories and sharing my experiences and sharing my wisdom. So back to the Awakening into the Void series. Last episode I shared was 23, and so this is going to be 24. And I wanted to go back over. So I talked a little bit in the previous video about manifestation, and something that I had mentioned was that it's important to move forward, like to remain in movement when you're wanting to manifest new things into your life. And I find that there's different components to that. So as I shared in the previous video, I had a time to rest between all the chaos that was happening after my dad died, between, losing the properties, moving to a new place that was quite small, having to spread all of his things throughout different storage units, and it was just constantly moving things around, And then in the house that my stepmother and sister ended up in, that house flooded. So then the whole process started all over again of having to move things. Like, it was just complete chaos. So I finally had a period of rest and recuperation. And I think I have to highlight how important that period was in my ability to manifest all those things so rapidly. I had a period of time, several weeks, where I did not have to think very much about anything. I could just kind of be inward and just rest. Like, I rested a lot. I just, slept and was very, very soft on myself. Like, I didn't put a lot of pressure on myself at the time. I knew I needed to have a job. I knew I needed to drive and have a car. I knew I needed to have my own place eventually, but I wasn't fixated on how I was going to get those things. So I was very lax and just more so focused on just feeling okay and feeling safe. And I was okay and I was safe. Like, I was with friends. I was able to do like little work side jobs for them, so I was getting some money, and able to pay for food and just basic necessities. And so it was chill. It was just what I needed at the time. But that period of time was really helpful for me to be able to manifest, because there was no strong fixations, as I said, because I needed all these things. Oftentimes you're like, when we're in a crunch, like say you get fired or laid off from a job, or you have to quit a job because it's like unhealthy, then we can be in a state of a stressful state of lack and of wanting and needing that can really disturb our frequency and state of being in receiving, because there's a part of us that is fixated on the fact that we don't have the thing that we need, instead of knowing that that thing is there. I don't know how it will come to me or how it will come about, but I trust that the timing and the right timing and, everything will align when it needs to. And having that trust is very important. And it's interesting because I'm in a period of time where manifesting just is not as easy as it was in the past. And it's very humbling for me right now because I feel that prior to the last 4 years, I had a greater sense of trust and knowing that the things that I need will come to me, And so it's good for me to share this for my own recollection, and so that I can, fall back into the practices that got me to the places that I needed to be and got me even further, to surprising situations that were beneficial and exciting and, adventurous. So, rest and being in a state of trust and not worrying is very important. So, I call the previous video Rest to Manifest because that is one of the important aspects of being able to bring things into the physical realm. Having that period of rest and being in a state of knowing that things were going to work out no matter what helped those opportunities come about. And that's when the action was necessary. It's like once the opportunities presented themselves, then I had to act and, trust that this is the right thing for me. It showed up right when I needed it to, and now I'm ready to receive and really take advantage of the blessings that lie before me. So I feel like the action part comes when the opportunities show themselves. But the rest and the stillness is a very important aspect of manifestation. So I'll share a story. And maybe 2 or 3 years ago, I had a period of time where I wasn't working, and at the time I was just focused on doing internal healing, like inner child healing and womb healing. I was focusing doing some womb meditations, and I really didn't have any particular things in mind that I wanted to manifest. I was working on my art, working on my passion, making shirts, doing different designs I'd never done before, and things were kind of at a standstill with that. So I figured, that would be a good time to focus on my meditations. And so I was doing that daily, twice a day, meditating, deep introspection, and it was for several weeks. And after that, I was able to manifest a large sum of money. And I did not, and what was interesting about it is those intentions weren't even within the work that I was doing, the inner work that I was doing. My focus was on improving my inner world and raising my frequency. So I had applied for these funds at a certain point, and I remember receiving a letter saying that I didn't get them or I didn't qualify. So I totally let it go. It was, so that's a huge part of things too, is when you put your desire out there and you release it. And what helped me fully release that desire was receiving that letter saying that I didn't qualify, I wasn't able to get the funds. So it was no longer on my mind. But I was doing this inner work that was raising my frequency, or that was intended to raise my frequency for none other than just to feel better and to tap into deeper aspects of me. So it was fascinating and phenomenal when, following that period of time, I received an email saying that I did in fact qualify for the funds, and they were sent to me almost immediately after receiving that email. And it took me a while before I correlated the inner work that I was doing with the fact that I was able to manifest that in that period of time. Now, what I did with the funds following that was kind of a testament to where I still needed to do work, as far as my, self-worth, and um, learning how to allocate funds that would help them multiply versus being back in the lack mentality, and not recognizing how to maximize on that funds. But that's a different story for a different day. The point is how I was able to manifest, and I was not focusing on the thing that I wanted. I put it out there and I let it go. So that's another thing, is when we know what we want, having the trust that it will come to us, and not fixating on the lack of that thing will leave space for it to come about into our reality. And when we focus more on raising our vibration by meditating, writing, doing things that make us feel good, doing inner healing work, playing music, drawing, doing art, doing the things that you enjoy, then the space, then these things start to magnetize to us, like the things that we desire are opportunities that will get us closer to the things that we desire. So in that period of time, going back to when I was living with friends, and needing to get a home and a car and all of these things, like, I was doing artwork. I wasn't fixated on the things that I needed, even though they were in the back of my mind. It wasn't a fixation of mine. I knew, I had trust that those things were going to come when they were supposed to, and I just let it go. I released it. And being in a safe space helped. Like, I did have I was in a very beneficial situation to live with people that I could lean on, and so I didn't have to worry about things. Like, I know a lot of people are in very dire situations, living paycheck to paycheck, so having that mentality is extremely difficult when you're worried about where your next meal is going to come from. So I do not take for granted, or I do not overlook the fact that I was very privileged during that time, even though everything had, there was so much chaos prior to that. I was so privileged to have those family friends hold me down during that time. So, and to have that period to just rest and recuperate and be in a state of receiving. So, yeah, just wanted to backtrack on the different components of manifestation, and I'm still learning. Like, this is still a learning process for me, and as I said, I'm in a state where my manifestations are coming in very slow these days, and I think there's a lot to that, because I've had to move backwards in a lot of ways, moving back to the West Coast and being back in environments that, where I previously was struggling. So there, it's like there's resonance there that I have to overcome, and so that's a different story for a different day. So we'll get back to the awakening into the void storytelling. So I'm just looking at some notes. So at the time, once I was able to manage, I got, living in a new apartment in this town, and living with some young women. I had a new job. I had a vehicle, which was my first car ever. I didn't start driving until I was 27 years old, which, I thought was the perfect time to start, because I knew I wasn't going to be ready until I was ready. I didn't want to start driving until I knew I was going to be a responsible driver. So waiting until 27 was just right. But I started becoming acquainted with these young women in the Detroit area, which was really fun and cool to me. Meeting other artists and creatives, and just really free thinkers, and just their creativity was on another level. So I love being connected with these women. And I was still kind of finding my footing, you know, like in the West Coast, I was so used to having this particular environment of people that I've known since, you know, eighth grade, and this particular group of friends that I would fall back on. You know, some of them I'm still really close with, but a lot of them have just fallen by the wayside by this time in my life, you know, which is almost, you know, more than 10 years later. But at the time, we were, you know, still pretty tight, and to try to create that same kind of dynamic in other places, not recognizing that those friendships, a lot of them were trauma bonds and were not healthy, were not conducive to growth and expansion. And, you know, in our 20s, sometimes it's hard to recognize those things. I feel like nowadays there's so much information out there about um, emotional intelligence, and so people are learning a lot younger what is good for them and what isn't. And at the time, I just wasn't aware that some of the friendship dynamics that I had prior to moving to the Midwest were actually really unhealthy for me. And it's just interesting how it's like there was an unconscious part of me that moved to the Midwest knowing that I needed to get away from the friendship dynamics that were preventing my growth and expansion, and more than anything, my spiritual growth. So the move was necessary. Like, I just, me as a person, like, I have to move around. It's more than just like my love for travel. It's about moving around energy. Like, it's how I'm able to grow. Like, the energy within me is very, it's very rapid fire. I don't know, that it's very like motivated by movement. Maybe it's the fact that I'm a Sagittarius, but I feel like it's more than that. It's more than sun signs or any of that. It's like my energetic signature, you know. So as I was saying, I was becoming acquainted with new people in the Midwest and just finding where I fit. Basically, it became very clear almost right away that the roommates that I had were not going to be my friends. Not that we couldn't be friends, we just were very different people. Very different people. They were a little bit younger than me and just different people. Like, I was not. I can be very picky about who I hang out with too, and I think I was really put off when that one roommate lied to me about something so small, and that just gave me a signal that I can't trust her. And if there's trust broken, then I don't even want to engage any further. It's like, all right, we're just roommates. We're just going to keep it at that. They didn't like locking the door. That's another weirdo thing to me. Like, no locked doors. Like, I grew up in San Francisco. I grew up in the city. We lock our doors, and we have a gate. We have a gate and a locked door. We have several locks on the door. You never ever leave your door unlocked. So that was just different lifestyles and different mentalities. But sidetrack. So I was hanging out with these women in Detroit, and as I said in the previous video, one of them was very motivating. She was very, you know, after so long, it was like, oh, actually, she's kind of pushy. But at first, it was like, wow, this girl, she wants to see us succeed. It was between she and another friend who they were friends prior, so I was kind of new on the scene, and getting to know these two women. And as I said, they were both models for this woman who was a body painter. Actually, this painting behind me is of a painting that I did of one of the models that she worked with, and for her African diaspora living models or living statues. But she's not. I'm still cool with her. Like, we're still buddies. But these other women, they were super creative and just fascinating, and I loved the way they thought, and I loved the way they created, and just their expansive mindsets. It was very inspiring to be around them. um, and the one woman who was like really, pushed us to be great, she was able to inform me of this fashion show where I said previously that I was able to not only model in, even though I'm short, I was still able to qualify as a model. And I was able to show some of my pieces, my painted apparel, in the show as well. So that was super exciting. Like, I still didn't really advertise my stuff to sell yet because I didn't have quite enough to feel confident enough to like open a website. But I had a website previously, but it was more to advertise like commissions and murals and stuff like that. But it was still just like, bare bones. I didn't know what I was doing, and I felt like I needed kind of an in between service to offer, or like product to offer people, so that they could like see my art and see my skill set. So this fashion show was just like an amazing opportunity to showcase my work and just, you know, put my stuff out there. So I was really excited that she, got me to meet the director of the show, and, you know, she told me just go up to him, bring him your artwork, and he'll get you in. And that's exactly what happened. Like, I'm pretty sure they were just about to finish selecting all of the featured designers for the show. So it was exciting that he looked at my work, loved it, and added me to the show. And so that's kind of how the three of us began to hang out quite often. So we were preparing for the show. She was also going to be featuring some of her work. And the other woman, she's just this phenomenal model. She would be modeling for several designers in the show. And I don't remember, I don't think she actually is a designer now. I don't remember if she was designing anything at the time, but I forget. She was definitely modeling, and she actually modeled some of my apparel for me, which was really kind of her. But yeah, during this short period of time, we kind of created this like little artists collective of women. And one of the women, she had a place in Detroit, and so we would go spend time at her house and have like these long talks overnight about how we were going to present our art in different ways at different events or different venues. And then the other friend had a place in another town, um, and we would sometimes go to her place and do the same, like planning and brainstorming at her place. um, and this was all, as we're preparing for the show that was going to be happening that spring, like in the late spring. So things started to turn left. I started to recognize that the pushy woman, she was very pushy about her ideals and her way of doing things, and just the motivation became forcefulness and trying to look for the right way to say this. She was just pushing her ideas and her way of doing things, instead of just letting us be in our own being and letting us be ourselves. So I would say, in some ways, kind of projecting what she thought was a better way to do things. And it was just interesting because the way the friendship, like, it seemed to happen so organically, and like, oh, we have so much in common. At this point, it was starting to feel, it's like she got into the door. So again, like, I was somewhat guarded at the time, but she very smoothly like got past my boundaries. And this is what can happen when we're in a place of, you know, new girl in town, like trying to make new friends and make new connections. It's a vulnerable place to be, and if you are not centered in yourself, which I was not fully centered in myself, it's so easy to get manipulated and duped by people. And with this woman, I feel like that happened, over the long run. But at first it felt like, oh wow, she's doing so much for me, and that was kind of the end too, was just, I it took me a long time to not let people do things just so that they could have some sense of control over me. And so it's like, if someone would do something for me or offer me something, my immediate mentality or mindset would be that I owed them something after that, that I am now indebted to that person. So I it was easy for me to give up my agency to this woman because she helped me get into this fashion show and like was the connecting person for me, like helped me get into this whole new network. So I didn't feel like I could stand my ground with her because I didn't want to lose that opportunity. And she was just showing signs of, like, I could take this away just as easily as I gave this to you, so it was like there was signs of abuse that were showing up, but I was like gaslighting myself and saying like, oh no, everything's fine, like she's, just trying to convince myself that everything's fine. And that's dangerous. That's something that we have to, you know women, men, everybody, non-binary, whatever you identify as, is something we can often do is in any kind of relationship, whether it be friendship, with our family, romantic relationships strongly, is we convince ourselves that, just because somebody did something for us or was kind to us in some way, that now we're indebted to them. So we give up our agency. And it's just a dangerous place to be in, because when we do that, we start to gaslight ourselves, or we start to convince ourselves things aren't as bad as they are, and then things get to a point where we have a hard time pulling out of the situation. We feel stuck. And that's kind of what happened in this friendship. And the whole kind of period was short lived, but it was still so intense. This woman was very intense and very overbearing. That's probably the word I was looking for the most. So I wanted to share this story about this time that she and the other woman, or the other woman and I, went to her place one day. And the other woman, she had a flight. She had some modeling opportunities on the West Coast, and she was really excited about it. And she just wanted to go out there and see what could come of it. She's beautiful. She has like the stature of just a supermodel. And I definitely believe that she could kill it out there. I knew she could. But the other woman was planting all of these ideas in her head that she was making the wrong choice to go out to LA, and that it would be a bad idea, and just creating this whole like scenario of how it wasn't good. I don't know, it was just very strange. And this is when I started questioning this woman, like, what are her motivations? Like, if you care about somebody and you want to see them succeed, like, why are you projecting all of this negative thing? You have to trust your friends and what they're doing for themselves. Like, what they want to do for themselves is right. Being a good friend is not imposing your disbeliefs on them. So that's when I started kind of stepping outside. I was still involved in the friendship or in the relationship, but I was also partially outside of it, just kind of observing like what the fuck is really going on. And so there was a night that the girl, she was about to fly to the West Coast, and the controlling girl, she wanted us to hang out that night, and so we met up at her house, and it was just an intense time. Like, I remember we were doing some sort of meditation outside, and she was just trying to get us to like divulge all kinds of personal information about ourselves, which was feeling, and this is when she started showing personality traits of the forcefulness and the pressure and the intensity and putting us on the spot. And she also had strong psychic abilities, so she would pull information out of us, like really private things, and lay it on the table, kind of like exposing us. And it felt like blackmail in a sense. Like, it felt like emotional blackmail, and just like, it was just very strange. Like, I've never experienced anything like this. And so she was creating kind of like this trauma bond between she and I and the other woman. And but this particular night, I remember she did that. Like, she was psychically kind of tapping into us, and then she wanted us to go back to her place, and was just keeping us up all night, like just hammering us with all kinds of like information and all of this stuff. And I kept saying like, yo, like, we gotta leave early in the morning, we gotta take homegirl to the airport, like, can we just sleep? And she just would not let us sleep. So it just felt like almost like this torture tactic. It was so wild. Like, I did not know what the fuck was going on. And I'm just gonna stop it right here, and I will continue this in the next video. But yeah, stay tuned, and I will see y'all very soon.